so this is like figuring out how this is going to work, okay? So, I first want to tell you that it's really nice to see you all. I've missed you. We've been through a couple of years of some rough sledding. And we've all had loss, whether directly or indirectly, and I just want to tell you, I really am happy to be here. I'm happy to be seeing you, and that I really appreciate what you guys do. And I think that's a really important message for me to give to you if I haven't seen you already. Because I still will have to ask your name because I can't remember. But, I got a lot of topics of discussion that I like to do, and I need to provide a disclaimer. And that disclaimer is that our program works really hard to work together, and our main focus is connecting and protecting you guys as you do your work. We see ourselves as a technical resource. We, as Marissa said, we meet once a week and say, does anybody have a project we want to talk about? Or and so we work very collectively. Well, you know what? I just rewrote my whole thing yesterday, and I haven't really talked with the rest of the group about what I'm going to say. When I first got here 8 years ago, I said, I've been in this business a long time, and I'm on probation. I'm going to say what I want to say because I believe it. And now I'm at the point where they could ask me to retire any time, and I could do that. So I'm still going to say what I want to say, And so I need to say that, some of these things that I'm going to say are Dave Cotton saying them. And I don't want to say that I'm giving the eagle word on all of this stuff. So I'm really already talking about the on-site waste. But, I need to tell you about there's a little bit of a cultural shift at Eagle. And we're going to talk about, again, as Marissa talked about, that there's multiple jurisdictions and therefore people that think they're in charge. Okay, so different permitting authorities. You've been hearing this. This isn't the first time I've said it. Not all flows are equal. Ron did a great presentation yesterday, if you saw that, talking about the variations and factors. We're gonna look at some case studies, and I'll probably never really ever wrap up. There is so much to share and so little time, But I'm gonna start by saying that as a program, we work together, and it really is our focus, and we see ourselves as your advocates. In some ways, we do the accreditation thing, which is, to be honest, our least favorite thing that we do. We feel that and some parts of it it's our least bang for our time, but it's part of our job. But other than that, our responsibility really is making sure we're doing wastewater in a right way, and that you guys aren't being tripped up. And so we really work together to try to help that happen. So one of the things I want to talk about is, we've been directed, through an executive directive of the governor, that we need to look at our statutes and rules line by line and make sure we're following this. This is some fallout. This was some directives that came from EPA as we looked at the Safe Drinking Water Act, some fallout from Flint, if you will. And so we have been directed at Eagle to do a line-by-line review of our rules and our regulations. So we're doing that. So we're focused really on the Michigan criteria in our program. We're focused on the administrative rules in our program. The campground folks are needing to do this. Part 22 is doing this, and Part 41 is doing this. And I'll tell you what that means to us is we don't know the answers like we used to. We used to feel like we could come to you and answer your questions. And so now we're stepping back from that because, Part 22 is really studying and they're going line by line and saying, oh, wait, I know we used to do it that way, but we don't do that. That's not what the rules and the laws say. We're going to talk about Part 41, and they're saying, so they issue permits that I think of them as kind of like the Public Service Board, where they're protecting the users of a utility. And when you have a privately owned public serving system, you have a utility. So all of a sudden, when you're looking at that from that perspective, they aren't necessarily looking at the Michigan criteria as much as they may be looking at 10 state standards. So I've got a couple cases where, oh my gosh, that changed the flows, and it makes it confusing and not predictable. And really, if we aren't careful, it's going to be your offices that feel a big pinch, like, really? Are you kidding me? So one of those things that I want you to be able to take home is that we need to look at it. And one of the things that's going to help me do that is this explainer. And this is on the groundwater discharge website. And we brought 50 copies with us. We asked the water resources folks to print us 50 copies. They said no. And we said, okay, but really, we believe you are our people. So we got these printed. We only got 50. They're 10 pages long. So, I don't know that everybody can take their own copy, but I would like each health department to at least get one. Okay, so, but it really, so it's on their website, and they talked to us a couple times. They didn't come out and talk to the health departments. They let Maliha know that it was happening. One of the things that we hope and we try to do is to work with Maliha and with the local health departments to make sure they are getting this information and to help things adjust. So this explainer, again, as Marissa started to talks about these three programs, which is Part 31, which is really the NREPA things that basically say all groundwater discharges need to be looked at and permitted. And that's where Part 22 rules came out of that requirement. And so, and in fact, as Marissa said, the Michigan criteria is authorized through this Part 31 and Part 22 rules. Part 41 is a different section. They have different authorities. It's under it's still under NREPA as Part 41. That's where we define sanitary wastewater. So we're dealing with all wastewater, and it's not all sanitary. So what we're doing is we're saying sanitary wastewater is defined basically in Part 22 as being treated or untreated water that's coming from direct home human activities, domestic activities, right? The wastewater, on the other hand, is everything that we're not going to reuse. So industrial process water, it's got your, your cooling waters, you can have a myriad of things. And it includes sanitary wastewater. Here's some examples of what's not. And this is just one of the tables out of here, and they break it up into the 0 to 1,000 gallons. So I said, I'll just show you some of these, the smallest, that are supposed to be permitted through a groundwater discharge permit. So this is a nice table. The table, it starts, and I don't think I put it up here, but there's some of these where there's 3 regulating agencies that's listed in this chart. In this case, these are all Part 22s. Food processing, marijuana grow operations. Marijuana grow operations, by definition, are not agricultural. So they aren't regulated, they aren't part of our sacred cow of agriculture here in Michigan, but they're actually, I'm not sure anybody's gotten a permit yet, but they're all supposed to have a groundwater discharge permit for any processed wastewater that may be being applied. There's slaughterhouses. I mean, there was a time when a lot of slaughterhouses were being permitted out of our local health departments. That little, and we didn't know it. That's not under your jurisdiction. And so, in addition, if you have a slaughterhouse, and you got to have, in a slaughterhouse, you got to have at least one bathroom for the USDA inspector. If nothing else, they get their own. So that's you. If the sewage, the sanitary sewage is separated, they need a permit from the local health department for the sanitary sewage. But if any of this processed water listed up here is commingled, then it all has to be covered under a Part 22 permit. So it pulls it right out of your guy's shop at that point. So whether it's wineries and whatnot. Laundromats, over 500 gallons a day. That's one washing machine. I don't know many one washing machine laundromats. Here's this Part 41. What is a public system? It essentially is a utility when you have a system owned by somebody or some corporation or company that serves more than one user. So me and my neighbor are gonna, we're having problems, and you know what? I convinced him that we ought to hook up together, and I'm gonna need a Part 41 permit to do that, which means I'm gonna need to form an LLC kind of thing. So Part 41 is gonna look at the legal structures. They're gonna look at, well, do you have escrow money to maintain it? Do you have a way to maintain this? How do we protect the user? And, oh, by the way, we're going to apply flows based on how we think they need to be calculated, or you need to propose to us and you need to convince us. Right now, Marissa was talking about table 6.1, which we have been selling. We've been singing and dancing and saying, whoa, you can use this, And basically, if I look at 6.1, it says that we're gonna use 70 gallons a day per person, and we're gonna assign one person per bedroom, and we're gonna have a reducing peaking factor as the system gets bigger. If you only have 5 homes there, you may have more high occupancy across the thing. If you've got 30 homes, if you looked at census data, it would say you're not likely to have 30 homes with all those people in it. So the peaking factor gets to get reduced. Right now, Part 41 is starting to look at using 70 gallons a day per person, and they're counting persons as number of bedrooms plus 1. And again, we would not argue that's illogical, right? The 2 people in the first bedroom and 1 person in each additional bedroom. You know, so that's still a little bit more than table 6.1. And then they're saying plus a 30% peaking factor, because that puts it more in line with the 10-state standard thinkings, which is their Bible, if you will. Okay, so this can cause some, so it's kind of nice. I just already went through this slide, except for that last bullet. This is probably one of the most, this is our new song and dance that we are selling, is saying, oh my gosh, when you have a project that looks more complicated, let's get together, we'll help you organize it. The part 41 and part 22 have been, we've been trying to beat them up, and they've been responsive to say, yes, we'll come to a pre-design meeting so that we can do that. And that's really critical, because we're gonna, again, this, Marissa really went through this, is the Michigan criteria applies to everything. That's our state code, if you will, up to 10,000. I refuse to say we don't have a state code anymore. We have a state code, and we exempt single and 2-family homes to the local code. Now, I'm not going to go further than that, because I know there's some problems with some of our minimum standards, in my opinion. So as we look at variances to this Michigan criteria, all variances need to have a written consultation with Eagle. Again, so now I'm starting to shine this light on some of our own line-by-line review, because we have been a little loose with some of our interpretations of how we do that. And so these days, it doesn't take much to want to vary from the code, because we've been trying to do better. And the Michigan criteria isn't always better. It's pretty prescriptive and not performance-based. So, campground permitting. So we have a campground program. We get permits issued by the local health department. Some local health departments have said, you know what, if the state's going to issue a permit anyway, we're going to provide some relief to our owners by not double dipping, if you will. Okay, let's get down to our rules, line by line reading, and say, the only way you're exempt from getting a Part 22 permit for flows less than 6,000 or less than 10,000 is if you have a local health department permit under the Michigan criteria. So, you know, this could, I just see that that's a potential rub point as we start to look at that. So they really need to be permitted both by the local health department and Eagle. Campground folks are looking more than just at the wastewater. They're looking at the collection system. They're looking at, you know, are the right number of bath houses and showers and whatnot. So let's look at some waste strengths as we talk about it. And again, Ron talked about high strength wastewater, and he told us yesterday that as an average number coming out of a residential septic tank, we ought to expect BODs to be about 120, you know, maybe up to 140, you know. Those septic tanks are working for us. The wastewater coming into that septic tank is coming in at 450. We're taking out the solids, we're letting those drop, we're letting the grease float, and we're ending up with about 120. So, but when we look at BODs from restaurants, and these are from sampling that we've done here. You know, when if you go to the you know, the resources online, these are some of the kind of numbers that you're going to get you know, and this is the same thing Ron was sharing with us, that okay, you might be a Chinese restaurant, there's a big variation in those numbers. What's happening inside that restaurant? It makes a difference. But again, this is BOD really is a representation of how much bacteria we're going to invite and how much oxygen that bacteria will need based on the amount of food we have to feed them, because we're using anaerobic bacteria. Campground waste. The Tennessee Valley Authority looked at the 5 states in the Tennessee Valley, and they sampled all through Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, Kentucky, and they wrote a nice report back in 2003, and the strength of the wastewater coming out of the septic tankage is at least twice organic loading. Do you know what? There's a bunch of money coming down the pikes for campgrounds. All of our state campgrounds are getting some money to bring that back. They're going to be knocking on your door. Part 22 is really looking at that and trying to evaluate dump station. If you have a dump station by itself, that wastewater, you know, Ron was talking about it yesterday, that wastewater can be like 5 times stronger than residential and be a chemical soup, formaldehydes. Part 22 is the rules are based on preventing deleterious effects on our groundwater. And we don't think, you know, some folks are going to say, well, what we do at the surface doesn't really matter. Well, where are our PFASs these days? We are not drinking glacial water. You know, we are drinking pretty young water, and our septic systems are in the water cycle as a recycle system. So in the future, we're either going to drink those molecules or we're going to swim in them. Okay, so we need to think about that. And Tanya, no, the sewer is not coming. So campground flows. So again, we got these campground rules, we got the mission criteria. We don't even have the same numbers in there for flows. You know what I mean? So, and campgrounds want to show you their numbers that say, oh my gosh, we are only using 30 gallons a day, not 75 gallons a day. We want to build our system based on these flows, but we don't want to talk about organic strength loading. No, thank you. So that's a really important thing, that as we sharpen our pencil and as we use the intellect and the science that we can, we need to remember there's the other side of that, you know. So there were at different times there have been permitting with really low flows. The campground program does say, yeah, we recognize that the flows aren't going to be that high, and we'll with a request and a little support, we'll reduce that. They aren't going as low as what we've done that in the past. So as you think about a campground, I would encourage you to get either Karen Beauchamp or Dave Graves involved. Make sure you're on the same page. So here's some case studies we're going to go. Here's a T campground, and I've left off the names, the full names. So an expansion of about 25 primitive sites. You know, and again, primitive sites aren't necessarily what they used to be. When I was in college going camping at a primitive site, I can just tell you that. You know, these primitive sites have electricity and water, but if you look at the definition, because they don't have a sewer connection, then it's still a primitive site. So they're going to get expanded. They're going to go to 200 sites at 30 gallons a day, 6,000 gallons, pretty magic number, right? Just below needing to get that the groundwater discharge requirement. One of the things that they needed to do, because they're expanding, they need to show that they have replacement area for all the flows. I do not want us to give away the one good site they have left for their replacement of existing flows so they can expand and blow out. You know, and there's some discretion at the existing system that's in use. If it's working fine and it's not in the water table, there's some discretion that can be used to allow for that continued use. So in this case, they needed to add some more area, and they needed to add a 1,500 gallons worth of septic tankage. So we're looking at this in the septic tank first, and here they go. Originally, these are the 3 tanks that are there. This is a 3,500 gallon a day tank, and so we're going up to 6,000. They're going to add their 1,500 gallon at the very front of that system? Excuse me? You know, and if you look at the rules talk about having, you know, at least X percent in your first chamber. So we're talking about having that first tank chamber being 1,000. So they're like 18% of a daily flow in that. And you know, why don't you just put the pumper truck there and keep that pumped out? So that was a recommendation that say, you know, figure out how you can plumb it in somewhere here. You don't need to have a whole lot of drop in between those 2 tanks necessarily, as much as you need that capacity and whatnot. So here's their kind of expansion plan. And so Marissa talked about those distributing valves. They're a pressure actuator. Every time the pump comes on, it changes the zone. Okay, and so this is their existing system. They're going to add this system, and they already have a distributing valve. They're going to add another distributing valve up here as a master, and then a second one over here. So this one, every time this pump comes to this one, the first time it goes this way, the second time that way, third time now look at this, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 zones here. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4 zones here. And yet this system's going to get as much flow as this system. And their design said we're going to meet the application rate if you look at the whole thing as one system. But if you do the math, this system's going to get 20% more. Okay, because it's and so all of a sudden, the true application rate over here, based on design flows, is it went from 0.75 to 0.9, and over here went from 0.75 to 0.65 or something. So you know, our recommendation is that this is not a good idea to have these different zones like this, but at a minimum, if you're going to do that, make sure that you have enough and the design is enough that you're going to get 0.75 over here as your minimum. And you'll have more than you may need regulatorily for the whole system, but so next one, a county campground. County campground, the campground maintenance folks say, oh my gosh, I can't really mow over this area anymore. So they came and they said, you know, we want to be proactive. So they went to the local health department and said, yeah, we want a permit for a new system. And you know, we love to be helpful. I mean, it's one of my favorite parts of my job is when I can be helpful. So we often are designing when I would say we shouldn't be. Okay, so this was a system that was they decided that we ought to size this for a possible expansion. So the local health department says, you know, they're calling us and saying, we have some questions about this and that, and we're raising our hands saying, I got a question. You know, you're talking about an expansion. You're talking about a system over 2,000 gallons a day. You're talking about 7,800 square feet of field. Do you think that's going for less than $15,000? They're going to directional drill they're piping. This project needs a consultant. You know, this project needs a PE. They need to really make sure that if they're going to design this for an expansion, that they're going to have room for replacement for all their flows. You know, and so our comment is, don't take them down a road that you shouldn't be taking them down, and then they have the wrong expectations. And they weren't happy to hear that, but they understood where we were coming from, and maybe said, I'm not calling him again. I don't know. But I'll tell you, our goal is to help you.
So Dave, before you go any farther, I have a question just based on the comment that you made. So we're talking about the subsurface criteria, then they have the draft out there. Then in the draft criteria, there's no $15,000 number in that at all.
And so in the draft criteria, all those systems are expected to be designed by a professional in private practice. So yeah, good point. Thanks, Bob.
I didn't see that in there yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no exemption on it. I think that's a good opportunity to point out the status of the draft criteria and how it will be applied.
Right. So the draft criteria, thank you, Regina. The draft criteria in our program for under 10,000 gallons a day, you know, that was a collaborative developed with private practice, with local health departments and with DEQ at that time. And it's a prescriptive, not a prescriptive, it's a performance. It adds performance and it can be prescriptive. And so we have accepted, and I'm going to use the small we of the on-site wastewater program and whatnot, that following that draft criteria is an acceptable way to get a variance. You know, classically we saw Marissa talk about the variances and say, you know, it's going to protect public health and, you know, in my mind, I like to paraphrase, be at least as protective as the criteria. Okay, and we have said if you ask for a support for a variance that's following the draft criteria, you don't need to do anything more than what the draft criteria request. And so, thank you. So, but that's a variance process. So anytime you're considering following the draft criteria, you should be involving the state, us. I got a campground condo. The individual sites are going to be sold. It's designed at 6,000 gallons a day. They got a variance. It needed permits from the local health department, the campground, and Part 41. Here's a case study, McDonald's, 2009, the 8-year-old system failed. You know, they put in a nibbler. You know, Ron was talking about this nibbler back there. Ron, I was out on the site with Ron here at this one. And then in 2010, we got surfacing effluent. 2015, after we put that advanced treatment, we got surfacing effluent. Even coming out of the nibbler system, we have BODs that are at 200. They added a polishing unit of an Advantex with that. You know, again, Ron talked about our convenience store, our truck stops. You know, the Michigan criteria talks about a flow based on a gas station. You know, I got to tell you, when I was in high school, you might have been able to buy a can of soda if they had a machine outside on the curb. And that was it. And now you can get it all. This is one that they came to us and said, well, we're going to do the prescriptive design. We said, wow, that's really strong. You ought to look at it. And it didn't. And I'm going to zip through. So they failed. In a pretty quick amount of time, they went in and they put some advanced treatment. I got a Taco Bell that wants to be designed under the local code. And we say, but wait a minute, what's your basis of design? Your local code only talks about residential waste strength. How are you deciding what that basis of design is? How are you deciding you don't have any requirements for saying, oh, we should have a bigger bed or not? I would say that you are putting yourself at a great liability when you're doing work. And I would say that was not necessarily an appropriate interpretation, that because it was less than 1,000 gallons, they should do it under the code. Can you imagine any pressure here? The folks already had the building up. It was a new place. They'd gotten their building permit. And so who's the pressure on? It's on you guys. You know, they were going to use some Elgins, and you know, we said, do you know what kind of poundage that's loading at? Does the manufacturer agree with that? A new restaurant, an office space, limited site capacity, proposed advanced treatment. They went through a variance, needed a letter of support from the manufacturer. That, you know, when we asked for that, I've been on the manufacturing side. I really like to make sure the manufacturer's a little bit on the hook to say, yes, you got a certification for residential, but you're recommending this for high strength. You better write a letter of support that says this is an appropriate use of your technology. So when it has a problem, you're okay. Love's Truck Stop, another one of these C-stores and you know, the letter of support came back saying, yeah, we can do this provided your fats, oils, and greases are less than 40 milligrams per liter. So we're looking at McDonald's right there. No grease trap. And I call the consultant and say, you know, your design says it must be less than 40. And his first response was, well, that's not my problem. I said, well, think again, buddy. This is your permit. And so they went back in and put a bunch of grease trappage. We have condo systems. Oh, this is really, I hate to, and you're all excused, okay? But this is a condo with 31 four-bedroom homes on its third replacement, okay? And so they need a Part 41 permit. The local health department flow determination is 9,548. Another magic number, right? Okay? So Part 41 comes in and says, we get them involved, and they say, wait a minute, the average flow is going to be 9,000, but you have to have a treatment system permitted for 11,200. Whose jurisdiction is that? So all of a sudden, you know, so I want to tell you that on Eagle, and I'll tell you one more case study because I meant to put it in here, that just came into the office. We got a permit that came in from, it's very similar to the apartment complex that Marissa was showing you, that came in with two separate buildings. They're condominiumizing it. They got a permit from the local health department already. And you know, looking at that, and we said, you need a Part 41 permit. And the Part 41 permit said, you don't have enough flows here for our 10-state standard approach. Yeah, put your machines on idle. And who looks like, who feel, you know. So my message, my plea is to, when you get these, get us involved. You know, we'll find the right staff. We'll tell you who to call. Because it may be the mobile home park and they're calling because it's surfacing effluent. And we'll say, well, that's an NPDES permit, okay, maybe, and you need to do this. But we don't have the answers. They're not predictable right now. And so I want you to know that we really do think we're here to help. And we've loved